Thank you, everybody in the HCI world, for carving out some of your day to be a part of this conversation. My organization, Otto Krager Associates, is in Fairfax, Virginia, and we have just started what is our 9th year in partnership with MHS, Multi-Health Systems up in Toronto, Canada. And so it's a very nice partnership where we focus in on a lot of our organization development work, actually uses a number of their assessments. And so I was very pleased to be asked to present this particular suite of tools that kind of make up this high potential toolkit. And I like the name, the High Potential Toolkit, because part of this is the toolkit itself. This collection of 3 tools that we're going to go over really does have quite a lot of potential to really land and leverage great growth and insight in organizations. But also, this is a great toolkit to use with high potential employees, leaders, ascending personnel. And so it's you can read the title in either way. I'm very glad you're with us today. Here's what we're going to be talking about over the next a little less than an hour. So I want to talk about 3 concepts that, as an organization development consultant, I'm very interested in. They come up constantly in organization development work, and that's change, influence, and decision making. It's hard to ever talk about leadership effectively without it touching on, if not actually focusing on, change, influence, and decision-making. So I want to talk about those concepts and 3 very interesting, focused, and even fun ways of approaching these concepts. The change style indicator, CSI, the influence style indicator, ISI, and the decision style profile, DSP. All of these are tools that were developed by Discovery Learning and now published by MHS. Now, give us a time to take a look at these tools, kind of see what they look and feel like, what you can do with them, and then also give you some time for some questions at the end. So that's where we're going. Thanks for being a part of the discussion today. Let's start with a discussion of change. Change is a tricky topic, and as a coach, as a leadership development person, I frequently struggle with the topic because so many models, there are a number of change models out there that actually talk about change resistance, yes or no. How much resistance is there to change? One of the reasons why this is such a popular and powerful model, this change style indicator model, is that this is a model that assumes that change is a constant. So the underpinning concept of this model and of the tool, it says that we're always involved with change. And so this model doesn't measure whether or not you engage with it, but what your approach to this constant is. So the CSI's approach to change is not change yes or no, or change good or bad, but it's change how do you personally go about doing it. The nice thing about that is that this is a model that puts everybody on a nice footing. You're never on a change-resistant, change, I'm against it, a change is bad place. And so everybody is change yes, but how best do we go about it? And so when you think about this, you could think about change from a perspective of rate. What is your desired rate of change? And so it's easy to think about that on this dichotomy here, that on this continuum line. So on one end of this continuum, you could think that change is best and most appropriate when it's occasional. So yes, change is needed, but only occasionally. Well, the other end of this continuum is that change is constant, and that constant change is good and appropriate. That's life. And so you could think of the rate of change making up this continuum line. Well, there's another one, and that's independent of the rate of change. How about the intensity of change? When you think of the intensity of change, well, the continuum there could be that change is best and most appropriate when it's targeted and incremental. So So kind of light change. What's needed when it is needed? Well, the other end of that continuum would be that wholesale and fundamental change, even dramatic change, is good and appropriate. And so you can take a look at this continuum line, and that's what the CSI gives us. And the entire model is based on a point along a single continuum. And so on one side, we'll call this the conserver side. This is the side that believes that change is best and most appropriate when it's occasional and when it's targeted and incremental. And so there's an acceptance of the current structure, and they therefore prefer change that is incremental. Now, the other side of this line, we'll call those the originators. These are folks that actually believe that change is more constant, and the wholesale, fundamental, even dramatic change is good. And so expansive change that really challenges the structure, that's what defines the other side of the line. Well, with any continuum, it's important to note the middle. And so the middle emerges as, we'll call that the pragmatist. And this is a group that really kind of explores that marries the both sides, that cuts out the extremes of either while pulling both together. So this is pragmatist middle space that prefers functional change. And so that's the CSI asks questions that actually put you on this continuum line about your general approach to change. And so the output of the assessment, it gives you lots of good, rich information about these styles and how to interact with the different styles. But the basic output of the data is on this scale. And what you come up with is you might be on the side of the line, 25% of the population is, that falls squarely in the conserver category. Or perhaps you answer the questions in such a way that you come out to be aligned with the 25% who score in the originator category. The middle 50% fall in the pragmatist category. And the pragmatist is interesting because of course, within the pragmatist group, you have pragmatists that lean conserver and some pragmatists that lean originator. So while pragmatist is a thing in and of itself, there are shades of different styles within the pragmatist style. So the interesting thing when you take the assessment is initially, simply enough, you come out on a point along this measurement line. Now, let's think about what that means, though. What I like to do in a group is once people have identified their style, I like to actually have the people talk to each other and kind of illustrate their point on that line. So know about me. And one question I like to ask is, when change is good and effective, what does it look and sound like? Again, that puts everybody on the positive view of change. The change is fine, change is natural, but what does it look like and sound like when it's actually good, when it's effective? And also, frankly, what scares me and irritates me about change. You get very telling answers from people at different points of the line when asked these questions. It's a great way of illustrating and kind of enriching a conversation about understand change of how it impacts me. Now, let's think about just with a little bit we've talked about already about change. Let's think about what that looks like. And this will lead us into our poll. So I'm interested in what you think. I'll give you some options, but what you think the impact would be. And so what would you think conserver, how do you think they would view originators? So remember that conservers are folks that think that want to work within the accepted structure, that think that it's best when change is best when it's occasional, when it's targeted, when it's incremental. If that's the case, what do you think the view of the originators is going to be from the conserver point of view? How are originators? Remember, originators want things that are wholesale, constant, even dramatic change. So how are conservers going to view originators? Let's take a look at this. You can vote. You can have up to 2 answers. But where do you think? How do conservers often view originators? Boring, imprudent, conservative, efficient, impractical. What do you think? How would most conservers view originators? Go ahead and answer the poll, and we'll see what the answers are. All right. Yeah, cool. Look at that. Most of the time, and so as we see as the data are coming in, that's terrific. That you've got imprudent and impractical are certainly on that list, because you've got that part of my conserver outlook is that these originators aren't being careful, aren't being cautious, and are certainly wasting time engaging with ideas that aren't going to yield results. Generally, conservers are not are wish that their originator colleagues would be more conservative, would be more efficient, and that's the so as a group, absolutely right. It's they see them as imprudent and impractical much of the time. That's great. Let's flip the coin though. Let's go back to the slides and flip the coin. That was great. What do you think? How do you think originators would view conservers? So these are folks who embrace change, wholesale, even dramatic change. How would they view folks who are more conserver in nature? And so are they more obstructionist, wasteful, overly cautious, exciting, visionary? How do you think? So there's that poll question. Let's go to the data and see what you think. Yeah, that's great. Yep, that's a bullseye. That obstructionist. That when you take a look at originators, looking at conservers, they frequently see that them is standing in the way. You're weighing me down. You're putting barriers in the path. You are so obstructionist on our path to the future. You're being overly cautious. You're being overly worried about the things that could happen, and that's keeping you from jumping into really engaging this change. Wasteful is generally not what is generally thought. Where it is wasteful is the originators who think conservers are being wasteful think you're wasting an opportunity, that you're wasting the great options we have, and wasting our resources by not reinvesting and growing. And so wasteful can be the case, but that's but only when framed that way, and it doesn't often come up that way. And exciting and visionary can actually be terms that make a lot of conservers nervous, because exciting, and I would like for there to be a little less excitement here, and what we need is more caution and careful movement forward. Vision is generally not something that the conservers step into. That's great. Good job. We'll go back to the slides. And so you've totally got the idea. Now, one of the things that I like to do once people have a good sense of what these different points along this continuum mean is talk about each other. It's easy to see how we struggle with each other, but I like for folks to actually flesh this out, and so that everybody is getting to record and generate some information about this is what I like and appreciate about your change, your approach to change, and what I also find irritating about your approach to change. And so it's a double-sided coin, and I can't go anywhere where both aren't happening. I like this, and I find it challenging. And so for people to start to talk to each other about that change is one of those provocative topics that is going to bring out some dramatic result. And then our approach to change really leads to this very important conclusion. What I want or need for change to happen is, so maybe I'm a pragmatist in the middle, maybe I'm a conserver or originator, but this is what I need for to bring my best regarding change. And some of the things that I say here are going to be challenging for you to do, maybe even offensive. I'm going to ask you to do something that you really feel is really stretching and violating, and you don't even want to do it. But there's some things on here that you can do. You didn't know to even try them, but I think this tool sets you up because of the conversation it sets up, and because of the information that you have. The report that you get back is 14 pages of information on the different styles and how to interact with them, how to treat them, that we really are, it provokes a nice supportive conversation around what change is, how I view it, and what I need to bring my best to it. It is and it's great to build up to, let me ask you for what I need, even if that's going to be a hard thing to provide. The change style indicator helps support a lot of good conversations that way. We have a couple other tools to hit, and they are independent tools. Every one of these stands alone and does not need the other two. One of the questions that I'm asked is are they a set? Can you, do you, should you use them together? And the answer is no, there's no should to it, but you often can. And this is a great little bridge here, that my conclusion in using the change style indicator is always tell me what you need. And so you're asking me to change, alter, or kind of stretch in my behavior. Now, it's up to me to decide if I can do that or not. But the next question is, how might I be able to influence you? So I'm asking you for something, but how might I influence your behavior? And so whenever you're asking somebody to do something different, that we have to start talking about my influence and influencing skills. And so this is a very interesting and useful tool to help us do just that. We talk about the influence style indicator. Now, the influence style indicator is it talks about the concept and utilization of influence. So let's kind of talk about what that actually is and looks like. Now, the influence is defined as the interpersonal behaviors we use to impact another party's choices. That party might be a group, it might be a whole system, it might be an individual, but this is what I do with you to influence your behavior, to influence your choices. That's influence. And in much of my work that touches on influence, I get pushback from people who say, I can't influence people, I don't have the authority, I don't have the title, I don't have the right position in the org chart to influence anybody. Well, that's actually a very limited view, and frankly, it's just incorrect. This helps me to gently, provocatively reframe that mindset. It turns out that there are different influencing styles. This particular model carves out 5 and measures 5 very specific influencing styles. And so let's talk about those just very quickly in terms of what they are. This is going to lead to some more information, another poll for you. And so one of the ways that I can influence somebody is to rationalize. There's the rationalizing style. Now, the rationalizing style assumes that power, and this is very important, power and the concept of power actually resides in a very different place for each one of these tools, each one of these influencing tools. And so if I am engaged in the rationalizing style, my belief is that power resides in the data, in the logic of the information in front of me. And so I advocate by offering my logic, by rational reasons, showing you the data. You do the math. If you understand, you will clearly come to the right conclusion. That's a rationalizing style. data dependent. And that's one way that I can try and influence your decision or your behavior, your choice. Another way I can move forward with this is by asserting myself. Now, the asserting style assumes that power resides in me, in the individual. And so what I need to do is exercise my personal power to push my view, my idea, my desire out to you and to push it, frankly, upon you. So I advocate, I debate, I insist, I challenge, I push my ideas or beliefs out on you, the group, or the system. And so I can assert to influence you. Now, another option is I can work to inspire. I can be inspiring. Now, I believe here that power still resides in me. And so I still am the kind of the primary owner of the power, but my power here is exercised pulling people to me. So I'm going to advocate. I'm going to talk about a shared purpose. I'm going to try and attract people to me and to my ideas. And so asserting assumes that you personally have the power and you push your ideas outwardly. Inspiring assumes you have the power and you're pulling people to you and your ideas. Now, I could also bridge. Bridging's interesting. Bridging assumes that the power resides in the shared space we have between us. If you can imagine a Venn diagram, the degree to which your circle and mine overlaps, that's the bridge we share. And power resides in our understanding that, in our creating that space, in our nurturing and building that space, affirming that space. And so what I do is I connect, I build relationships, I develop coalitions, I emphasize points of agreement and overlap. And so their bridging energy is spent doing just that bridging and working relationships, maximizing collaboration. And then lastly, there's negotiating. And negotiating believes that power resides in the ability to quickly, practically, pragmatically craft an agreement. And so the power is in the ability to hold a center and come to some decision. And so negotiating really touches on all of the other styles without engaging in any of their extremes. I have some facts, like rationalizing. I have to put myself out there and say what I believe, but I also try and pull you to me and try and craft some middle ground where we have it, in addition to practically come to some agreement. And so those are the five: rationalizing, asserting, inspiring, bridging, and negotiating. And this tool, the ISI, when you take it, actually gives you a very interesting data display. The way the questions are asked, every style is pitted against every other style in a one-on-one matchup. Would you do this or would you do that? 4 times. So asserting goes against inspiring as an option 4 different times, et cetera, all the way through. And so the result of that kind of psychometric construction is that the results are going to be a fairly clarifying, unambiguous portrait of somebody's favoring one over the other. It's possible for everybody to be in the middle, but it's statistically that rarely happens. And what you have up at the top of your report page, which is shown here, is the strength of your preference, how much time you spend in one style versus any of the others. But also, you see with the percentiles, with those dark lines that appear within each style, you see where the 25th, 50th, and 75th percentiles are of the population. So you get to see not only how much you assert versus how much you bridge, but it also shows you how much do I bridge or assert versus John or Jane Smith walking down the street, just the average person. And so there's a lot of information on this one page. And in addition, there's some kind of summary profile characteristics at the bottom. So that the ISI, in about 15 minutes or so to take it, and this comes in paper pencil version and online, just like all of these tools do. You get the printout in terms of dominant style. You get secondary styles, some orientation, some summary characteristics, tips for influencing, like the CSI. This comes with a tool, about a dozen-page report that actually gives you lots of information about each style, what they look, what they sound like, how to access them. And if there's a style that's underutilized, something that you tend to really avoid, like in this case, the bridging, it highlights that. And so this is the end goal with this tool is it enables you to see not just what do you tend to do. That's an interesting point of self-awareness, but it really tries to position each one of these 5 influencing styles as a tool from a leadership perspective and an organizational perspective, as a tool that is good and should be accessed and used. So ideally, while I might favor as a leader 1 or 2 of these tools over the others, I really need access to all of them. I need to be able to deploy rationalizing to influence some people, while I need to be able to bridge to influence others. And so this idea of gaining skill with all of them, I think, is an important component of training that comes along with the ISI. Here, let's do this as an example. I'll take you through a couple of these examples, and then I'll ask you a question. So, what style would be most effective for an individual if you're facing a situation where you have organizational authority? So the authority is yours. You have a clear view, a clear goal, and you're really facing a time crunch. And so if these were the realities, what is the style that you would that is kind of called for by that circumstance to be most effective? And the answer actually is asserting that you've got the power. You don't have much time. It's clear what you need or what is needed for the situation, and so the best way of driving forward is just asserting yourself and getting done what needs to get done, even if asserting is not a skill that comes comfortably to you. Here's another one. So how about this time? You're facing a situation where collaboration and buy-in are needed. You need your folks on board and signed on to this. The issues are sensitive and the issues are complex. Well, how would you try and influence that decision? And the answer, there arguably could be others. An obvious answer is bridging, to come in and really explore, make people feel heard, kind of engage them. That the more you bridge, the more you build collaboration and buy-in, 2 of the real critical issues here. So let me throw one open to you. So what style would be most effective? So let's say you're engaged in a situation where there is no right or wrong answer, and there are multiple real divergent interests and points of view, and you're really trying to help kind of facilitate some kind of solution. What do you think? And so let's so pick one of those: rationalizing, asserting, inspiring, bridging, or negotiating. What do you think the answer is? And we'll go to the poll and see what your answers are. Yeah. All right. So we get the people continuing to vote. Go ahead and do it. And so you can do any. I can walk the earth doing any of these. The specifics of this particular point that there really is no right or wrong answer. We need to collectively decide something, and and there are many people who think and feel many different things. I mean, that is something that calls for, and so majority has it here, kind of calls for negotiating. That's not to say that you, if you have something you're trying to sell, you're trying to pull people to your point of view. You could inspire. You could rationalize if you think the data suggests an obvious path, even though there are these divergent points of view and different ways of considering those data. And so there are other things you can do. This is a task that calls for that. Certainly negotiating would be a nice, appropriate way forward. And so the idea with negotiating, so that's great. That's so nice work. You can go back to the slides here. And the idea here with when we are facing a person or facing a group that we need to influence, the first insight is that there are multiple ways I can do that. And so the ISI actually lets us see that I have some options. Some of these options are going to be easy. They're going to be automatic for me. Others might be challenging. What's interesting is when I face so the first skill is to be able to step back and think, what are my options? And perhaps might my best option be a tool that's actually hard for me to pick up. Part of the training we like to do with the ISI is to have people that actually have as a preference and as a skill set each one of these influencing styles, to teach out how to do that. For instance, get people whose preference is for rationalizing to talk about, here is how one rationalizes. Here are the tips and tricks and insights from somebody who does this. This is how to assemble and set up your argument and lay that out. And how do you bridge? How do you bridge with people? Well, if you aren't a bridger, that might seem somewhat mysterious. And so here are the things that you do with your body, with your voice, with your tone, to build that relationship and find and support that common ground. And so the ISI is the first step in identifying styles. The ISI as a process is really about skill building and helping new leaders select the right tool for the right circumstance. So that's the ISI, the Influence Style Indicator. And one of the things that this discussion talks about, that this is decisions. I mean, so one of we talked about kind of making decisions and influencing people on decisions. Well, let's talk about decisions specifically and pull on our third tool. And this is a very interesting a tool that not only points out the design of the decision style profile, is not only to talk about different decision styles, what you might prefer and what is easier for you, but very specifically, it's aimed at teaching anyone who wants to engage with it how best to go forward in making decisions. And how much inclusion do you craft or do you engage in making a decision? So let's take a look at the decision style profile. This is oriented just as much toward helping people do it correctly as it is, it is in making decisions correctly, as it is just trying to identify styles. And so this model actually includes 5 different decision-making styles. And within those styles, there are 5 situational factors that impact decision quality and their acceptance and implementation. And so this self-assessment is designed to identify the styles you frequent more often, but it's also designed to lay down a structure that will help you, if you navigate through it, sharpen your decision-making skills. So let's give you a quick introduction to this. That the decision style profiles, decision-making styles are directing, fact-finding, investigating, and collaborating and teaming. So let's talk about what those things are. You have access to these slides if you would like, of course, to download these and have them. But the idea with directing is you're basically going to do this yourself, that you rely completely on your own judgment. You understand the situation. You have all the information you need to make an effective decision. So you don't share the problem. You don't solicit information. You don't. You pull the trigger yourself. This is the least time-consuming style, and it all rests on you, the decision maker. One option you have in making a decision is you can make it from a directing point of view. That's one option. Now, fact-finding is a little bit different. Now, these are points along a continuum. Now, fact-finding is directing with more targeted decision, data gathering. And so there's specific data points I need. I need to go ask Sue about that schedule. I need to go ask Juan about this event. So there are a couple of people I'm going to go and just get those targeted pieces of data. I know from whom and I know what I need. And now I don't tell them why I'm asking or how I'm going to use the data they're sharing with me. I'm specifically going to glean facts that will help me to make this decision. And so fact-finding, it's a directing style with more targeted data acquisition. That's an option, and sometimes a very appropriate one. Now, investigating is the next style. Now, this is the first time that I'm actually sharing, I'm pulling other people into this decision, into the problem. Here's what I'm facing. Here's the problem that needs to be solved. And so I'm going to target the people that I pull into this process. And so there might be the person from shipping and receiving. She certainly needs to know this. And then there are these two parties, and I'm going to pull them in. I'm going to let them know what the issue is, and this is what I'm thinking about, and that I might get some input about the decision at hand. But in the end, I still am going to go and make that decision. And so I pulled them into the process, and I've informed them, and I've gotten information from them, but I still make the decision. It's more inclusive than fact-finding, but in the end, I still pull the trigger. Now, the next style is collaborating. This is, I pull everybody in, I open it up. The group knows. I'm transparent about the fact that this is what the problem is, share data, have data flow back and forth. So I discuss the decision with all the stakeholders simultaneously to avoid he said, she said, and confusion. Now, in the end, I still reserve the right to make a decision. Even if many, many people say X and I decide that it's Y, then, well, that's part of the collaborating style. In the end, I still, as a decision maker, am accountable. And then lastly, there's teaming, which is I turn the entire process over to the group or to the larger whole. And we share information and trade them, but the group has to reach some group decision, some consensus or kind of group decision, and that's the teams to decide. And so when you think about these different styles all together, so directing, fact-finding, investigating, collaborating, or teaming, you have kind of very different approaches. Now, some will be easier on you than others from a style perspective, but this model assumes that the best way of choosing this is not because of your style, it's because of the circumstances of the decision. So when you take the DSP, the data sheet, there are two kind of tailored data pages that you get, and the first thing that it tells you is it asks you 10 questions. So the assessment itself is 10 cases that you read, and how would you decide which one of these 5 would you actually use? Would you use directing or fact finding or collaborating, and so you select the one that you feel is most appropriate, and so it gives you a readout of for question 1, question 2, question 3. How did they fall out? The cases are written so that the ideal decision-making style is twice. There are two examples of each one. And so there are two directing, two fact-finding, two investigating. So they crafted cases that really kind of rested on that. And so you get to see the distribution that you chose. The printout actually shows you not only what your style was, the choices that you made for each one of these 10 cases, it also tells you what the suggested, and that's just what it is. It's not you got this one wrong. It's the suggested style. And that suggestion actually comes from the database that of managers, which is pretty extensive. This was designed and used and validated over 20,000 managers originally through the Center for Creative Leadership. And so based on the collective views of these leaders, this is the style that was used. And so you get to see where you fall out against other leaders. And the suggested style is the majority style that was chosen. And so a very interesting display of data there. The next page actually looks at all of them together when you compare all of the styles. Did you tend toward the inclusive, where teaming is the maximum choice, or the uninclusive, where directing is the chief style? Did you tend to one extreme or the other when all of them are taken into account? And so this lets you know, is your tendency to include more, perhaps even when a more directive style would help you, or do you tend to minimize inclusion even when a more collaborative or team-oriented style might be more appropriate? And so just very quickly, I want to get to your questions, but very quickly, not only does this identify what's the style you choose, but it gets into very specific information on the factors that impact where along this inclusion continuum a decision should or is most effectively had. And so we look at clarity, information, commitment, alignment, and time. These are the factors that impact a decision's quality. And so clarity, how much clarity is there about the problem at hand? The information, the facts and knowledge needed to make the best decision. Do I have all of the information that I need? How about the commitment, the level of support that I need to implement this decision? Is everybody on board? How much alignment is there? The degree to which the stakeholders share common goals among themselves. So is there alignment between the organization and the people with each other? And then lastly, time. So do I have time, and how urgent is this decision? And how much time do I have to actually include everybody in a larger process? And so those are the factors that when I consider those five, it actually suggests a particular style. So here's an example. Here's a sample case. And so be thinking about, I'm going to give you an answer here, but this is not a poll, but you can be thinking about this. So let's say a clinic that's doing some work similar to that done by your unit has been caught short-handed, and your managers requested that you send 3 of your 12 folks to help for a couple of days to meet that emergency. Now, the work they'll be doing is relatively routine and requires only the skills that your group already has. So what they usually do for you, they'd be doing over there. Any of your employees could be chosen, since they'll merely be working in a different section of the clinic. And they won't be doing any more or less work than they are currently doing. So you know your people well, and you can easily select the few who can do the job, and your own unit's work can be arranged to allow for these 3 workers to be absent. And so if that's the case, how best would you decide? So to any one of those, you arguably could engage any one of those styles. that is designed, and the majority of leaders actually agreed that, yeah, that's a directing decision. You've got all the facts you need, that you've got high clarity, you've got high information, you don't have much time. This has to happen really quickly. And so directing is an appropriate style there. Now, if it turns out directing's hard for you, then that's a self-management issue. How do I work my own discomfort with the fact that I think that's the answer? And that also is work that can flow out of the DSP. Is how do I get good at using the tools I know I should use, but that are hard for me to use? Part of the DSP actually comes with, in writing, this decision tree. And so where it asks you questions that walk you through those 5 decision factors, that ask you a question about alignment and commitment and time, and that in this yes-no decision tree that helps point you to the right style. As a value-added piece of the DSP, there's also an app that the publisher has created that you can actually use, so you can pull it up on any internet-connected device to actually help you in real time. It asks you a series of yes/no questions, and it helps point you in the right direction. So that's a nice feature of using this decision-making process. And so that is the decision style profile. And so our discussion here talked about the influence style indicator, the change style indicator, and the decision style profile. I know we're coming up on the end of the hour, and I would love to know what questions you have about the models, the tools, anything else. And so you can, as Holly mentioned, you could type in your questions, and she'll open this up, and I can take as many as time allows.
Thank you so much, Heil, for sharing some knowledge of high potential best practices and models. These styles have been very interesting, and we've had really good feedback from the folks online. And yes, you know the drill, and you told everyone quite well. Go ahead and put those questions into our question and answer box, and we'll get them to Heil in the time that we have remaining. And we can also get questions to him after the webcast, and he can follow up. So please submit everything you have. So, Heil, our first question comes from Karen, and she says, of the change styles, how can people find a common ground given the differences?
And the nice thing about the common ground, Karen, is that the change differences are in the process of change, and so what's important if you're leading people through change or facilitating the process is to find the ground we have in common. Now that ground might be, how do we invest this money? How do we what changes are we going to make to our goals? How do we proceed and craft a way forward in fiscal 2018. And so I'm a conserver, you're an originator, and we agree we need something that makes us successful. And we can totally agree and share that value. Now, I think we should be kind of cautious and careful, make only incremental changes where you think, no, actually now is the time to really roll the dice and really leverage our growth. And so what we're disagreeing on is process and how we get there, but the there needs to be the same. And if the conversation is ever allowed to devolve into you're being foolish and blind and I am an anchor and am backward thinking, then we haven't gone anywhere. And so we agree that we have this shared goal, that we have this shared desire as in our success. How do we get there? And what ends up happening is we craft a middle path, and the pragmatists who generally make up the bulk of most groups wind up being not the answer, but the go-betweens, because they can more often translate their part conserver, part originator, and can generally translate for the extremes. That's a very important question, Karen.
All right, awesome. Thank you. And we have a question coming in from Donna, and she wants to know, does decision style profile have logistical links to situational leadership?
And if you look far enough away from these models, if you look at any of these models from 10,000 feet, they all start to look, if not the same, they all start to look related. That I think it is, so it's not directly related to situational leadership overtly, but what it is, given that the continuum line of decision style profile is about inclusion, and it's the relinquishing of soul control and including more and pushing power out to the group. Situational leadership and the loop that is done through situational leadership does something similar by starting off with kind of firm control and then pushing it to the individual, so that you have more independent action and are not supervised quite as intensely. And so, in that regard, they look similar, but there was no intention with the DSP to convert situational leadership to a decision model.
All right, and thank you, Heil. We'll take another question, which is coming in from Mariana. And she says, does the assertive approach also ensure a realistic representation of one's style if they bridge styles?
Does the asserting approach... what? Could you say that?
Yeah. Does the assertive approach also ensure a realistic representation of one's style if they bridge styles?
And so one of the things that these can these different styles can be married in terms of I can be high or higher. I can favor multiple styles and perhaps have asserting and bridging as something that's something just anecdotally I tend not to see. They are somewhat complementary energies, and one is the power is in me and I push it out, and the other is the power is in our sharing ground and being connected. And while they don't have to be mutually exclusive, they frequently do not happen at the same time. And so so while it's possible those energies can kind of work against each other, if Mariana was talking about is if you're one or the other, if I favor asserting or if I favor bridging, is it effective to engage the other? That can be, you can, but it's hard to do, and you tend not to do it for very long, for very well. For instance, I'm a bridger. That's my natural style. I can influence through asserting behavior, but not for very well consistently. I can put those clothes on for an afternoon or for a meeting, but it takes a lot of my focus and effort to stay in that space over time, and that's a similar statement from people who prefer asserting and try and adopt bridging. They can, but it's a real effort, like going to the gym and working a new machine that you never sat in before. It can be a real chore at first. So if Mariana, if that didn't hit the mark, then please follow up with email on because I want to make sure you get an answer, and I'm not sure I just did that for you.
All right, thanks, Heil. I think we've got time for just one more question. So we'll take this from Peter, and he says, how does this methodology relate to the DISC profile?
And so the DISC is And it doesn't directly, Peter, that this, like the tie-in with situational leadership, that they really are different models, and DISC is unique in that it's a blended, it speaks to hardwired styles and adopted behaviors, and so DISC has a bit of a muddled both and kind of approach to kind of present these four different styles of being, four different kind of values and behavior sets. Now that's the so you can find some correlations in, especially when it comes to the ISI, the influencing style model that we talked about, that with some overlaps. Like for instance, if you're a high D, high dominant, to actually be having a preference for asserting, that's something I see and would expect. That for high influence is that high asserting and high inspiring. So there are correlations, but of course there's no causal link, and there are limits to how much you can kind of overlap those two. If you're sometimes you've got a tool that is so effective one can swap out and be used for the other. That's not the case with DISC and any of these. They can hint at the same topics, but really can't replace each other. So I hope that helps you, Peter.
All right, perfect. And so we'll go ahead and wrap up our material for today. We are at the very bottom of the hour. Please feel free to continue this discussion on Twitter and LinkedIn. And I'll say one more thank you to Heil for presenting today, and thank you also to everyone at MHS for making our webcast possible. We do look forward to seeing all of you guys participate in another HCI learning opportunity soon, and we hope everyone has a great day.